Every major industry that's failed to modernize is getting rewritten by decentralized, immutable code. First, it was finance. You got players like Ripple, Chainlink, stablecoins. They showed the banks that they were light years behind and then let them know they didn't need to worry because they had already built the technology that they can just plug into and upgrade. They allowed the banks and the financial rails to survive and built all that custom tooling infrastructure for them. Then came decentralized AI, storage and compute, crowdsource GPUs, peer-to-peer networks, think Render, BitTensor, Grass, and a lot more are coming soon. Now, well, it's energy's turn. The $10 trillion electricity market still runs on outdated batch-based systems where utilities take months to settle bills. OpenVPP wants to rip that apart, replacing it with blockchain-based settlements, tokenized power infrastructure, and programmable energy credits that can move in real time. But this isn't just a moonshot from the outside. The founder spent years inside of the system, building for the largest utilities in America. And now he's betting everything on bringing the grid on chain.
It turns your electric vehicle into essentially a staking NFT, where this NFT then starts calculating, how many charging sessions you've had, how many CO2 tons of offset that you have, like your environmental impact.
That's the kind of thinking that got my attention. They're not just building another crypto app. They're creating programmable power markets.
We partnered with Blackstart AI, which is a holdings company of Power Kiev, to help them rebuild the electric grid of Ukraine. And so that was kind of like our foot down to say like, hey, we're here for all the right reasons. And, we want to make sure the world knows that.
So from rebuilding Ukraine's energy infrastructure to integrating smart devices worldwide, they're already thinking on a global scale. But the real question, and why I wanted this conversation, is whether this team can convince a slow, regulated industry to run on crypto rails.
The business model is to become a payment processor in the space. And so, while like the SaaS deals are nice, I think kind of creating that regulated stablecoin for the industry, that's really that 10x or whatever X moment, and being the processor or the processing layer for that.
That's the ambition to become, I don't even know if I can say this, but like the Visa or Swift of global energy settlement, but that's not even a good example because they've now been disrupted as well. But before we go into any of that, there was something I had to ask, because I know that a lot of you may have seen some headlines here or there, and I care about being transparent with everyone on this channel. So for everyone watching, we addressed the elephant in the room, and here's what we talked about. Now I want to take this a bit of time to talk about this kind of FUD that was out there and give you a chance to clear it up or let us know exactly what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one, we met with Hester Pierce in the local SEC office here.
So guys, this is my full conversation with Parth Kapadia, CEO of OpenVPP, and what might be the boldest move yet to bring the entire energy grid on chain. And if you guys have been following the channel, you know just how bullish I am on the energy growth sector and the real demand and the need for exponential power growth as these data centers and AI become more of a national security issue. And all the regulation and red tape has mostly been ripped off and allowing these markets to finally move forward quickly. Now, OVPP became interesting to me when I started doing the research, because if you're like me, you're kind of just obsessed watching all of the different things that are happening out there, especially with different energy companies, right? As you guys know, and a lot of you maybe participated in the nuclear deal that we offered on wealth.xyz before, but from all kinds of new nuclear rolling out, from what Hadron is doing to these micro modular reactors, to what NuScale is doing on small modular reactors. But these things will be, especially the micro modular reactors, will be made in a gigafactory type setting, mass produced, shipped all over the world. And when there's not full demand for that power, because those things run 24/7, they're gonna want to be able to plug that back into the grid and optimize for decreasing some of the monthly costs. So they're going to pump that back in the grid. I saw Elon the other day propose this crazy idea. I think it was the interview with Rogan, where he said, if we can get, I think it was like 100 million Teslas on the road and each of them have like an AI chip in them, then you could build the world's largest kind of decentralized neural network, something like that, which is wild. Also, what Parth talks about in this is just how those with EVs are already plugging in and using the technology they've built. So this hits home to me. I love seeing people, especially small startups, attempting to disrupt major legacy infrastructure that vastly needs upgrading. So guys, I must remind you, as you guys know who have watched the channel recently, I need a disclaimer, and I need to tell you that this conversation is not financial advice. It is just educational for entertainment purposes only. If you like this video, go watch a few more of mine, and if you really like it, then subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, guys, let's bring Parth onto the stage. Parth, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. I have a lot of questions, and it's actually particularly interesting to me because recently, I've been in this crypto bubble for the past 13 years and haven't really invested anything much outside of it. But recently, there's been so many opportunities in the kind of private equity world, and especially this last year with a lot of the regulatory red tape being ripped off of a lot of things like energy, for example, supersonic, passenger travel, and other things like crypto and all these kind of things. So my audience, some of them participated, and myself heavily, in a nuclear energy company called Hadron that is doing like micro modular reactors. And so I'm just curious, like, how that energy system and grid flow works, and what you're building to try to streamline and make that whole system more efficient. So yeah, this is particularly interesting for me. Can you guys just let us know just a brief little background about yourself and then kind of what you're building?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much, Kyle, for having me on your show. Really delighted to be here. My name is Parth Kapadia. I'm the founder and CEO of OpenVPP, where we're building the Internet of Energy. And, for me, this goes back the last 15 years when I graduated from my alma mater, which was a feeder school into my local regulated electric utility here in Chicago. It's called Commonwealth Edison. Everywhere here in the US, we're kind of bounded by our regulated or deregulated, based on where you're living, your regulated electric utility provider. So it's everyone from the generation, the transmission, and then finally down to the distribution system, where actual homes, commercial, industrial customers get delivered power by their local utility. So that's where I, had a handful of internships and, started off my career really as an engineer in my local utility, and, ended up working my way up through the corporate rankings to the mother company of ComEd, which is called Exelon Corporation, which is a multinational holdings company of a handful of generators, primarily nuclear as well, but all different kinds of generation. But my specialty has always been on the distribution engineering side. And so from there, I went on to kind of working on the vendor side at a couple large vendors into the utility. Sunrun was and is the largest residential solar company. And so worked there on a team where we productized energy storage and kind of created the first multi-billion-dollar product that paired residential energy with energy storage, and kind of the first version of what we call today a virtual power plant, which is essentially aggregating and stringing together energy storage together and dispatching it from a distribution engineering standpoint during critical times. So think of when it's really hot, really cold, tornado season, hurricane season. That's where the price of power can spike, and supply and demand becomes of the essence during those critical windows. Then I moved on to a large metering provider, and that's kind of where that really sparked my interest at kind of this intersection of Web3 and energy, because I learned that the power markets don't settle as fast as some of the other industries like traditional finance per se, which led me to my next role, which was at a company called AutoGrid, where I headed technical product management. AutoGrid was then acquired by Schneider Electric, but they essentially created kind of this first virtual power plant product. But the biggest issue is when they get these distributed renewable resources to participate into virtual power plants, the settlement times for them are crazy. Like if you get a commercial industrial building with a microgrid on site, or even just your home that's powered by solar and storage, they participate when it's really hot, but they don't get compensated for it until 3 to 6 months later. And they
Wow.
get compensated through a gift card today. And so that long-winded settlement was kind of, a way to really modernize the customer experience and say, hey, we have things like stablecoins. We have a blockchain, which is really the most revenue grade accounting layer in the world. And so that gave us kind of the first foot in the door to develop OpenVPP with really a key pilot and stakeholders kind of behind the scenes, and people just in my network. And my co-founder, he's also leads innovation at a publicly traded electric utility as well here in the US. So yeah, just a long history in the industry, and our product's been kind of like a long time coming, and just a lot of things happened at once, both from a regulatory and a product standpoint. And just really excited to be here.
So VPP stands for virtual power plant, right?
You got it.
And
Yep.
and that essentially is kind of when people talk about the grid, where people are buying and selling and distributing their excess energy back into this kind of system, right?
Well, it could be excess energy, but it also could be just like, hey, don't charge your EV at this time, or take load off the grid as well. And grid
Mm.
operators compensate people for strategically taking load off the grid. Imagine a large skyscraper, or a set of skyscrapers that have unoccupied rooms, or even setting their thermostat back a couple degrees makes a huge impact on the grid during critical times.
Wow, that's crazy. And so they already have some sort of system right now that manages and operates and monitors and then eventually pays people out for this kind of stuff?
Very legacy, archaic system. But yeah, traditionally, it's kind of been like voluntary. So a signal goes out to large commercial industrial customers to say, hey, it's really hot outside. Is anyone willing to participate? This is like a phone call, or an email, something very archaic. But the automated control of these systems is kind of just coming around. And then the compensation and settlement from them, that's where OpenVPP comes in,
Yeah.
is to settle them, to encourage them, and to retain them from staying within the utility programs.
So is there also some sort of like customer experience upgrade too with these notifications and awareness and stuff like that as well?
Yeah, so we're working on kind of like so OpenVPP is a B2B to C company.
Hmm.
So our primary customer is that regulated utility that puts together the programs for their end consumers, residential, commercial, industrial. And yeah, so our platform comes with kind of like a fleet operating view, where a utility can set out like marketing campaigns to say, hey, connect your devices, and give them an easy click through. If you see the platform today on world.openvpp.energy, we kind of have the retail view where anyone in the world could add their car, both gas and electric, kind of as a proof of concept or a demonstration. But essentially, we would deliver a white label solution to our business or a regulated utility, and then they would put their branding on it to deliver it to their end customers.
Okay. So right now, who controls this kind of VPP system? Is it the local utility, or is some kind of national monopolistic kind of government thing, or how does that work?
Well, it depends on where you are in the world. And traditionally in North America, it has been sort of this centralized, regulated, natural monopoly, in a sense. But in places like Texas and places in California, where it's semi deregulated, they have kind of had this competitive model where anyone, if you check all the boxes from a regulatory standpoint, you can deliver power. Texas is one of the only places in the U.S. which is totally 100% deregulated, meaning if you check all the boxes, you can start delivering power, buying power off the market, and then reselling it to the end customers, providing them the entire experience, smart programs, the electric meter. But the rest of the United States is still pretty much fully regulated and natural monopolies.
So if that's the case, then do you think that is it possible then that a private kind of company like you guys could could actually go and offer these services, and it would be okay to do commerce and help these guys with this, and take them away from this natural kind of monopoly that's been formed, that's been regulated.
Well, yeah, they have a ton of software vendors. Like imagine a large government entity, like when they have do things like billing or just managing their entire electric grid, they have lots of software vendors and different components of it. But again, we're a startup. There's only a few of us. We recently announced that we're teaming up with a company. They're called Itron, and they probably make the electric meter on your house. And so what we're doing with them is, their business is the physical meter on every single building, house. I think they have like 90% market share in the world, and they sell their billing platforms in over 100 countries. But, they naturally see that the meter is no longer going to be physical anymore. So they have a conference at the end of this month where I'll be presenting what we call Meter Data Management 2.0, the future of the customer experience, where we're kind of jointly looking at the integration of digital assets into the billing and the metering system that Itron could offer into the future. So that would be kind of like our go-to-market next step versus us as a startup. They would essentially white label and package what we're having is into their existing sales flow.
Okay, so then how does that, if they end up going forward with that, can you just tell us how OVPP actually improves that whole experience, and then like how the integrations happen, what they use your platform for, and maybe like how it improve their revenue, or their, why they would want to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, like we showed them a chart. It's a really interesting chart. So like if you imagine kind of like a graph of their metering endpoints, it's limited to every single home or business. And so they're kind of staying flat. But think about the smart energy devices, across companies. Like think about Tesla. Like they have solar panels and smart inverters and batteries going on, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
houses, and also the electric vehicle. And so you see these smart energy devices, they're kind of hockey sticking up. So what, our value prop is that, there's lots of devices out there in the world that you guys aren't metering. And so, what kind of goes behind what they meter today? Like their bread and butter has always been revenue grade metering, means it's held by a couple industry standards. One of them is called ANSI, one of them is called C1219. And these are kind of these energy consortiums that have been around for like centuries to say, hey, this meter has accurately delivered how much this person, place, or business is consuming in terms of electricity by time. So this is it's all measured in what we call kilowatt hours, or essentially
Mm-hmm.
like the energy you use by the time you use it. And so what we're saying is like, what is the next kind of evolution of it? Well, it's essentially what you've built is an accounting mechanism. What is the next best accounting mechanism? It's decentralized, it's auditable,
Yeah.
it's non-alterable, it's highly secure, and now with innovations in L1s and L2s, they're also very fast,
Yeah.
in order to kind of support like IoT or like high throughput pieces of time series data. So what we're saying is that, you have this, a blockchain that could potentially serve your purposes of calling what's called revenue grade. And so with OpenVPP, we're able to connect into smart devices like your EVs, your solar and energy storage, your smart thermostats, and saying that, hey, in combination with your physical meter, with the data that's coming off of these devices into a smart contract, could we have an application or that says if then this that, say if this person participates in their local virtual power plant, could you go and then send them the compensation for participating in your utility program, whether that be a really hot day program, a cold day program, but essentially a fleet view into your existing grid that helps you balance supply and demand, not necessarily from a central power plant, but a virtual power plant, which is an aggregation of prosumers within your electric grid territory. And so that's what we're working with them to deliver.
Gotcha. And so, what is what is it that you guys are building? Are you building, is this like a layer one or layer two, or is it a dApp that's on top of some other layer, or what is it exactly that you guys are building? I mean, obviously the software, but where does all the kind of blockchain stuff settle and
Yeah.
live on?
So we announced that our retail product that you see online that was built on Base, and so essentially it's a dApp on Base where anyone can connect their electric vehicle and essentially get compensated in OVPP and USDC based on the programs we put out. But essentially, this serves as our kind of like, it's in our pitch deck, it's in our sales flow when we go talk to utilities and the metering providers of the world to say like, hey, we already have delivered 6.5 megawatts. I think we made a tweet this morning of flexible capacity through the electric vehicles. But we are yet to announce where our core institutional product is being built. We have a strong relationship with them. They're a layer one, and they're a new layer one, but they're kind of positioning themselves as the layer one for institutions, and we're building our institutional product there. And we're going to be testing it with kind of our go-to-market energy partner as well. And we're simply, we're just a dApp portion today, but what we call ourselves is a payments layer. And so that's why we call ourselves the Internet of Energy, is because we're building that revenue grade digital payments layer for the power and utilities industry.
Can you go into a little bit more about the retail kind of the 6.5 megawatts that you just talked about, and how you just have normal everyday people like maybe watching this sign up and start participate, and kind of how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could go on to world.openvpp.energy and you'll kind of get through the walkthrough. You can connect your wallet, and essentially what it does is it walks you through of adding your vehicle to the platform. If you have a gas vehicle, it's cool. We'll show you how much you could save if you got an EV and you're still eligible for connecting your device to the platform and earning some USDC. But if you have an electric vehicle, you walk through the platform, and what it does is it turns your electric vehicle into essentially a staking NFT, where this NFT then starts calculating, how many charging sessions you've had, how many CO2 tons of offset that you have, like your kind of like your environmental impact, as well as your flexible capacity to say that, hey, if you were to stop charging on a really critical day for the utilities, how much impact you could have. And essentially what we're showing is kind of a global view of what a global virtual power plant could be. That 6.5 megawatts that's been kind of delivered through the lifetimes, since the app has been out for, I think, the last 6 weeks or so, across 37 electric vehicles, 36 or 37 electric vehicles. But essentially it represents a number that could, essentially, if they're all charging at the same time, electric utility around the world could essentially use that as flexible capacity. So it's really a representation and a proof of concept that, we want to bring to the utilities to say, hey, people want to participate in a new modernized way. Here's an example of people around the world becoming what we call prosumers and kind of, smart energy individuals.
Got it. Okay, now I want to take just a bit of time to talk about this kind of FUD that was out there, and give you a chance to clear it up or let us know exactly what happened. To those of you who are watching, I guess on your X account, there was a couple posts about partnerships between Hester Pierce, the SEC commissioner, otherwise known as Crypto Mom, and I guess your old employer, Commonwealth Edison, who both came out publicly after you made those posts and said like invalidating those claims, saying there was no official partnership. And then Zach came on later and blew it up, and there's some severe backlash from community, whatever. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one, we met with Hester Pierce in the local SEC office here, and I think with the way we worded it, we worded it that we were working alongside her. We didn't mention a partnership on that one, but she commented on it to say that she didn't endorse us by us saying that we were working alongside her. And so that was kind of that. And I think our person who manages our social media overnight, kind of freaked out overnight and said, I don't know what they did exactly, but some feature on Twitter that hides the comments. So they hid it. And then, we woke up the next morning during US time and we're like, what is going on? And we saw it. And obviously we unhid it because there wasn't really much there. Like, if anything, it was good news for her to clear up, to say like, hey, we're not endorsing you, but we didn't think that we were claiming an endorsement by saying that we worked alongside her and kind of educating her, about OpenVPP and how digital assets are very important for the energy industry. So that was kind of the first thing. And then the second thing was a previous announcements that we made. Again, like, I have a really good relationship with Commonwealth Edison and Exelon Corporation. Actually, our advisor at OpenVPP, he's a vice president of distribution and transmission at Exelon, Craig Cremian. And so I met with an old colleague there. We were, at lunch, and, he heads kind of the electric vehicle program at ComEd. And we had lunch, and he was like, yeah, whatever, you can post whatever. He was kind of like laughing about it and said, cool, like, I'll get you whatever you want, because, I'm kind of like the person I could just walk through the door and, make my way to the top floor within the executive office. And, that's kind of the reputation I've had in my local utility, because I work there, and, they all know me and we're all friendly with each other. And I think, obviously my partnership was with him and his team and his department. Not necessarily was that communicated with the main person who manages the Twitter account, nor did we have a commercial partnership, but it was enough for me and, an old colleague to say like, yeah, let's do it. So that was kind of that. And then the third thing, which was kind of really interesting, this was my friend too. His name's Sahas Kata. He's the founder of Smart Car. And that's how people are able to connect their EVs now on the world.openvpp.energy. But I've known this person for a really long time, and we worked together when I was over at AutoGrid. We integrated his technology into AutoGrid. And so myself and my partner, we, met with him, and, in person, we're like, hey, let's, we want to take a picture. And we talked about the token and, whatever. And we're like, hey, we want to make an announcement that we want to have a partnership with you. And he said, sounds good, go for it. And it was just kind of like, he's the founder and CEO of the company. And then kind of that, the day after, he messages me and he's just like, hey, Parth, what is going on? We're getting bombarded on every single channel, on our customer inbound, my inbound, all my employees inbound, to say, hey, are we associated with OVPP token? Yes or no? And he's like, it seems like almost like AI bots are hitting us up. And so then he goes back to the PR, like he has to protect himself and his company. And he puts out a blanket statement to say like, hey, we met for coffee. They're using our technology, but, we're not partners, kind of thing, just to, protect himself. But, that's kind of the experience that we went through. It was, very tough being like a first time founder, especially in crypto. And, coming from the industry, like where I have a lot of respect, mainly the industry operates on LinkedIn, which is okay. So like, some of the industry has seen it on X and some hasn't. But since then, we did announce a couple more partnerships. And the way I'm doing them now is posting them on LinkedIn first, having confirmation from who we're partnering with. Then when I go ahead and make the tweet, I hyperlink that post and put it in a video form with the founder or the person we're announcing with. So it's just been a learning experience for me. But again, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger kind of opportunity. So, that's kind of what we went through. Yeah,
for sure. And to give kind of viewers some context here, usually when you have these kind of discussions with, people who don't like avidly live within the crypto Twitter bubble, they have no idea what kind of, because they have no idea what kind of, they don't really have much of a community, right? They're just like, private or a public company who's, I guess when you're public, you do have a bit more audience and exposure, and you have to be more careful. But a lot of times, you guys have no idea how reactive crypto people are, because they want to verify if these things are true. They want to know if they should buy the token or short it or whatever. And so they're all just trying to verify these kind of things, which often comes very shocking to these other partners who had no idea that they were going to get so much inbound and questions about it. And then then their legal freaks out. And, we've had kind of similar experiences, but especially seen it in projects that I've been advising or helping. And yeah, it's definitely not uncommon, and it is a learning experience as well. Um, okay, so now that you've kind of cleared that up a bit, let's talk about the partnerships that you have landed and kind of some of the big ones that you have, and what does that mean for traction? You know, yeah, let's just get into that. Oh,
Yeah.
first question too.
So
First, sorry, one more question is like,
yeah.
um, so how is your relationship with those three parties now? Did it get damaged at all, or are you still continuing to work together with Hester Pierce, ComEd, or SmartCar?
Well, Hester Pierce, I mean, she's pretty busy. So we do have an email chain with her assistant. So, I mean, that's there. But yeah, with ComEd, we're going to be excited to, announce something more formal in the near future with both ComEd and SmartCard. So we're, yeah, look forward to that. Stay tuned. And I think Twitter has been calling it the revenge arc. So we're gearing up for that. And yeah, we're continuing to work in the best way, shape, or form we know how to. We did announce a couple partnerships after that. Partnered up with Power Kiev and Black Start AI. And this was kind of like the first official one where I announced it on LinkedIn, and the whole video, like, it was crazy. But this was kind of us to say that, hey, between me and my co-founder, we've spent 30 plus years in the energy industry. And now, so one of the biggest things in Ukraine is, since the war, they have kind of been decommissioned from the transmission grid of the European Union. And so we partnered with Blackstart AI, which is a holdings company of Power Kiev, to help them rebuild the electric grid of Ukraine. And so that was kind of like our foot down to say, like, hey, we're here for all the right reasons. And, we want to make sure the world knows that. And at the same time, we offered all of our software resources to help control energy storage units, both at the transmission level, commercial, industrial level, and even some batteries that are being installed at schools in Ukraine to help them set the standards and the framework they need in order to connect back to the European Union grid. So that was kind of the first partnership that we announced. And then after that, we also announced one with a company called Rainforest Automation. And they have been in the space for, again, like since 2016, I think the founder said. And they're in every single customer utility program as it relates to the demand response. They have some big deals coming up on the commercial industrial side. And we're like, hey, how long does it take your commercial industrial customers to settle? He's like, well, it's like 3 months, 6 months. And then it was kind of like, well, what if we could settle them instantly? So it's just kind of like a light bulb moment. He's like, we'd love to roll out OVPP to all 100,000 units of ours in the field today. So we have an over-the-air update. Once we announce where our core product is being built, we're going to follow up and just kind of deploy OVPP on all of Rainforest Automation's hardware that's already in the field with lots of their customers. So yeah, that's a little bit about what we've been up to. And then again, I mentioned that we're going to be speaking at Itron Inspire at the end of the month, which is a really big flagship conference.
And so, is there some sort of partnership or something, or working with Circle or Circle Alliance program or something?
Yeah, we're in their alliance program. Spent a lot of time in their New York City headquarters for lots of different things, and so stay tuned for what we've been working on with Circle. But we have a really good relationship. We're in the alliance program, and got to meet the CEO, if you see, with a pinned picture on my Twitter. But yeah, between me and my founder, we've spent like way too much time in their brand new World Trade Center headquarters. Really amazing office and really great group of people to work in the industry with.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk about the need and utility for the token. So far, like what I've heard about the blockchain aspect is just kind of this coordination layer, this ledger essentially that's publicly and immutably keeping tabs of all the energy, and then also the kind of the settlement layer. But what is the actual token used for?
Yeah, I think when we set up the entity, with our lawyers and stuff, we were said that this was a governance token. But since then, we've kind of, we've just been maturing as a business and as a project. We made an announcement with Team Finance and Findas. Findas is one of the top tokenomics prod or companies in the space, and they help
Yeah.
just early stage projects develop like really key tokenomics. And so we locked away a big chunk of our token to basically go towards people connecting more devices. And so while more devices come online, they get minted into NFTs, and they're going to be going towards token rewards for all the retail people that can connect their devices and keep them connected. So, right now, yeah, we mentioned the 6.5 megawatts fully delivered, but we want to see that number 10x, 20x, and we think we can do that with a really cool incentivization for our community. And so on the other side, we also mentioned that, once we start delivering on a lot of our kind of OpenVPP Inc., which is our US business, and, when we can land some of these utility deals and actually publicize them and start bringing revenue in the door, a lot of the revenue in this, $10 trillion industry is huge. Like one SaaS deal could be, 10 figures, pretty easily. And what we want to do for the community is we want that some of our SaaS revenue to going back to buying the token back, maybe burning the token, and communicating, working through our really strong and stellar team on the marketing, the centralized exchange team, the market making team, to be like, how do we really give back to the community? So, we're focused on all the above and growing OVPP as not only a business and a token, but also, making the world more carbon friendly and delivering clean energy solutions.
Yeah. So I've worked with Findos quite a few times. Pretty cool stuff that they do. I think a lot of people underestimate or just have no idea how critically important it is to, I mean, if you have a token, like, you should have like a really, like, the way I always explain it is that if you launch a token, you're launching like a virtual uh, nation state. And that needs to have all kinds of stuff around the monetary and fiscal policy of the token, the governance, taxation, rewards, revenue, distribution, balance, all these kind of things, which a lot of projects don't even think about, which is why in the long run, like, they don't usually hold up. So have you guys discussed or figured out, I'm guessing that you probably have, but, setting aside a large amount of these tokens as incentive rewards, if a lot of people join, um, that single-sided distribution without an offset, which I know that you said you would, eventually put revenue back into the system. And, but like, the first thing that reminds me of is like Axie Infinity, where it was just, everyone grinding and earning tokens and then selling those to buy food and pay for groceries, whatever. Um, the problem with that model is that you didn't have a counterbalance to that inflation. Right. So have you guys done the math and kind of figured out like what you're going to need to do and how much money needs to go back into the system? And do you have any other ways of kind of offsetting that inflation?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a great question for my co-founder who's been working really closely with Fristo, the CEO and founder of Findes.
Yeah.
And they're coming up with a really cool, unique model of the way all of these assets get minted as NFTs and the way they earn. But I agree with you. I think, there's something that, like, the value of them, again, I don't want to quote anything, just being involved in crypto for these few months, it's like, oh, what you said, this and that, like, what are you promising and stuff. But there's going to be a formal announcement here shortly once it's out. So, I'm not sure what I could share at this point, but once it's out, the announcement where we partnered with Findas and Team Finance, that went out. So they're working on it now, and they're going to put
Yeah.
out something more formal here in
That's
the
good.
very, very near future.
Yep. I know Hristo knows this stuff. It's like I said, I worked with him actually for many projects. He
Yep.
built really, really complex and detailed token models, and very, very, very good. So where are you guys right now? I mean, you have the beta up for the retail, or just, the end users to kind of come in, connect their electric cars. Do you guys have any other like traction so far on customer acquisition and sales and revenue and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my key focus on the business. We just came back from a conference over the weekend. It was held at Governor's Island, New York City, which was really cool. Like we had to take a ferry to get to the island. And the conference was called DERVOS, which is Distributed Energy Resources Vos, kind of like Davos, but the clean energy version of it. And you had people in the industry, by the names of Jigar Shah, our old director, Department of Energy, Jesse Pelton. I don't know if you know him from Twitter. And, kind of like all these companies that are all kind of looking at, the industry is kind of like dangling AI by kind of like a key to be like, there's no AI without energy or unlocking energy. And so a lot of utilities, they're really interested in what OpenVPP is building because they have a massive backlog of interconnection requests from AI and data centers. And so no utilities can build fast or cheap enough in terms of upgrading the grid infrastructure or, like centralized power plant is just out of the question. And so, but again, we're a small startup, there's like only a couple of us. So our biggest play is, going B2B to the utilities. So I mentioned, we're at the conference at the end of this month, but this previous conference, again, like everyone is trying to get into this category called grid services, is essentially looking at different pockets of the grid and providing it more flexible capacity where the distribution utility has no more money to upgrade the grid. And so when the utility has upgraded the grid, they have to go back to what's called their Public Utilities Commission and make a rate case to say that, hey, we need to update the transformers in this area or these set of power lines. And then, if the state or their Public Utilities Commission says, okay, go ahead and do it, all the ratepayers in that area actually go and subsidize that. So everyone's bills go up. So, utilities are extremely excited about this virtual power plant technology is basically the last mile for getting, people with smart energy devices to participate in their local electric grid. And so, just a handful of utilities, they're very interested. We're told about, can give a little breadcrumb, but we had a great conversation with Energy Impact Partners, which is one of the largest VCs in the clean energy space. But they're really interested in looking at a strategic market in the U.S. It's called Xcel Energy, and their headquarters, I think it's in Denver. And Itron is also working on virtual power plants in that area, the metering provider. And so we're kind of everyone, has their own piece to the entire value chain. But why OpenVPP is so strategically aligned is simply kind of being that last mile, that payments layer to helping programs retain flexible capacity over the course of longer seasons within the utilities. And at least knock on wood, I told my partner that this time in the next 4 or 5 years, expect a lot of competitors to come about. But no one's kind of doing exactly what we're doing, at least not yet. So that's why electric utilities are very excited. And we'll have our first set of pilots, partners, SaaS revenue deals, coming out and closing, by the end of this year, early next year.
Yeah, back to the kind of nuclear case. I mean, by 2030, the amount of energy produced is supposed to go up significantly, and then also by 2030, we expect to have quite a bit new energy online from from small modular reactors or micro modular reactors. I've been looking at these things a lot, and if you're a data center and you get let's say you get you need 20 or 30 megawatts. Let's say it's like 21, 22 or at the time, whatever. And then say that you get some of these 10 megawatt micro modular reactors from Hadron, and you got 3, so that's 30. And then you have, depending on the draw or maybe the need from the data center, you have this excess that you're producing, right? So is that something that would benefit from what you guys are doing, where they can push that excess back into the grid and then get compensated for it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great in theory. Well, at least like putting my industry head on. It's great in theory to have excess, but again, it all comes down to when the utility needs it. Like if you have
Right.
excess in the middle of the night and it's cold outside, and all the charging has shifted to the night, and power prices are not negative, then it doesn't necessarily make sense. But if things are really hot and we got a wildfire in California, Northern California, and the grid needs more power, otherwise people are going to be out of power, then absolutely that excess makes a ton of sense. So
But I just
yeah.
wonder if it's, if it makes like economic sense for the example I just gave for them to be storing the excess in batteries, and then when it's needed by utility that they can just push it out. Like, is that something that also you guys could build into it where there's a smart understand, like maybe you're already doing that, I don't know, let us know, but like where there's some sort of automation process where when they need it, if they got it, send it out kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the partners that we're working with, they're essentially creating, like, next to AI and data centers are basically like what's called a microgrid. And so they're building capacity on site on the microgrids, things like solar energy storage, small modular reactors, even mini gas turbines. They're building it all next to the data center, and they're
Yeah.
essentially they're helping accelerate data centers to get interconnected faster by saying that it's, hey, we're not just building a data center, we're building the next grid resource. Like, we're a power plant in our own.
Yeah.
So if it's really hot outside, or there's going to be a wildfire, we can ramp down our data center usage, or basically get off the grid entirely and use our own assets. But if you guys need power as well, they're creating what's called power purchase agreements with
Yes.
their local grid provider as well. So they are deciding, like, what a fixed price is, what day and time, like what that price would be like. Is it a contract over a year? Is it 6 years? What kind of capacity goes into it? And they're actually getting project financiers to also underwrite those capital investments. So there's a rate of return for investors as well to front cash for the construction of these sites, and then essentially earn a rate of return as almost like a buffer on that power purchase agreement back to their local utility.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of all happening in real time as we speak.
So one of the things that I like to ask founders who have built companies who also have a token, as the founder of OpenVPP, who I'm guessing has equity investors, and a proper, for-profit equity company, and then also this public token as well. And I'm guessing that you hold a significant amount of each, the token and the equity. Um, how do you, like, where does your, um, like, how do you decide how much of the value accrual goes into the equity side of the business versus the token side of the business? And, how do you make those kind of decisions?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking all the right questions. It's a really it's the right question to ask as the founder, and there's always kind of the finding the balance between the two. So the token, obviously, as a startup, it serves as kind of the first basis of operating cost. So when we launched our token on Ethereum, we had a tax with it, and again, like, we partnered with really cool, really smart people in the token space to help us get all of this off the ground. And kind of from an Ethereum utility perspective, it's common for a utility to have a tax. And so while we had that on, I think for the first, I don't know, a couple of weeks of launching the token, that really helped us kind of develop, like, revenue that we needed. And so then, our team was like, all right, it's time to take it off, because essentially it becomes unattractive to have a tax just from an investor standpoint. Like, nobody wants to invest in a tax. And I think previously tokens or projects might have abused that system as well. And so essentially, like, we had enough in the bank to help us with our runway to start, and the tax turned off. And so, but then, that the pool of tokens that we have, like, do you use that to essentially build the token side of the business? or like what's legally allowed to be done in order to use that operating cost in order to go and do business development on the U.S. entity side. So these are all questions that we had to our legal teams and accounting teams, like what's allowed. And so then on the U.S. entity side, the incorporation side, that's kind of like I mentioned to you, one of the SaaS deals. If we close them, within our sector, these are 10-figure, 6-year, 10-year long deals that
Hmm.
kind of go on, and you might be building one thing 1 minute, and then they just ask you like, hey, well, we actually want you to build XYZ, which the same developers that you have building the DApp that you see world.openvpp.energy, they'll be asked to go build something entirely different, which helps us suffice for our SaaS deal. So, at the end of the day, you're right. The founders, we own most of the equity in the incorporation and a lot of the tokens as well. But it's just, taking it one day at a time and kind of doing
Do
the
you
right
have
thing and looking
do
at
you
the
have
greater good.
do you have private investors in the equity business?
Um, no, we right now, we have a clean cap table. It's my
Mhm.
co-founder and myself, and we're close to raising venture capital at some point, but we had the token come out, which helped, and then we are also very interested in building out our leadership team.
Yeah,
And so once our leadership team is on board, we onboarded some really key advisors from really key companies, and they're all interested in saying like, hey, before you get VC, like what's our, let's ink our deal kind of thing.
yeah.
But right now on the cap table, it's just myself and my co-founder.
So it's pretty fair to say that the OVPP token community funded your startup.
In a way, yeah, in a
Yeah.
way.
So, I mean, this is just my suggestion. You know, I would try to make like you have a significant amount of these tokens. The token community essentially funded the startup, not VCs, and the token community has no exposure to the equity side of the business. So, I mean, you can go two ways with this. From my perspective, one would be to do some sort of thing. You can talk to Histo about it. How could you issue? And then you have to check, of course, with like the securities laws too. But how could you issue like, I don't know, all the traders, all the wallets who bought OVP during that tax period, and maybe even till today or whatever, some sort of revenue share distribution token or NFT or something like that, where they have revenue rights on the kind of profit from the equity side of the business, um, or you focus on pushing most of the value or profit, the value accrual the profit. So obviously you want to scale the business with revenue and more employees, more salespeople, all this kind of stuff. But the profit that you're getting, uh, if you push if you do get some of these 10-figure deals, and then you pushed majority of that profit into the token and buybacks and that kind of stuff, um, you'd have an insanely valuable token, and then you hold a bunch of that, so you're already getting that upside, and then it'll be like it's kind of like I feel like that would be the right thing to do for your community and token holders. That's what I would tell you if you're pitching me right now from that idea from the beginning, because it gets really complicated, when you have these two parties you're trying to make happy, and like you're kind of half-assing both, if and especially yeah. So anyway, that's just my two thoughts, but my 2 cents. But yeah, so last thing is like, what would it take? What is that like 10x moment or something? What the deal that you get done, or the contract that you ink, or the tech that you build? What it is it that would really send this thing to the moon, if you want to say that? And guys,
We've always kind of
I'm not talking. And for YouTube content moderation, I'm not saying the token or future looking of expectations or rewards. I'm asking from a company growth perspective. What would it take?
no, and just to touch on your last point, it's an amazing idea, an amazing concept. I know you've been around the space for a lot longer than us, and so we'd love your advice and your expertise. But I think from like a North Star perspective, you're right on the money, because that's exactly what we want to do. But we got to get into the details and really execute on that.
Yeah,
But
and then if you do take on VC capital, which would be one route to go, and I have nothing against that because the other option is selling your token right now to pay for operations and growth and stuff like that, and that's just going to put a downward pressure on that token price and be negative sentiment because the way that psychology works in this market is token price goes down, tech sucks, right? Token price goes up, it's awesome, and so it just has like a morally damaging perspective if you're selling that. But one way to solve for that, and we can talk about this later offline, but is bring in VCs on a predominant like token deal, right? Or just let them know that this value goes there. So maybe you give them equity as a backup, but you let them know that like your intention is for the equity not to accrue a bunch of revenue or profit, but like for that value accrual to happen in the token. So you give them maybe a 1-to-1, equity and token warrant or something like that. Anyway, yeah, we'll talk about that.
Love
more.
to talk to you offline about it. I mean,
sure.
Yeah, and bring my partner in as well. But the last part, and I know you had like the YouTube strikes or whatever, but yeah. I think for us is that really the business model is to become a payment processor in the space. And so, while like the SaaS deals are nice, I think kind of creating that regulated stablecoin for the industry, that's really that 10x or whatever X moment, and being the processor or the processing layer for that, similar to MasterCard or a Visa. That's kind of like our unicorn moment is where we're trying to go.
Yeah, I guess one last question is, you said that there's not a lot of competition right now, but you see it coming in the future. Do you believe that at this point you have any kind of protective moat, either in like IP, technology, relationships, whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like the way our product is built today, it's kind of like, good luck trying to recreate it because it took, 30 years of being in the space between my partner and I to kind of, create something like that. And then two is, our strategic relationships. Like I mentioned, we're talking to the largest billing and metering provider in the space now. And, they're looking at us to being like, what is the next version of our business? So, I would say that's our competitive moat is, potentially integrating with them and, having a joint go to market, and then utilizing existing stablecoin infrastructure to kind of, go experiment with the industry through our network, and then going back and really informing like what an industry revenue grade digital asset infrastructure really looks like, beyond the next bull run or micro cycles, because this technology is something that the energy industry has needed for a really long time. Mm-hmm. And so getting out there, participating in all the right relationships and experiments and studies and pilots, that's only going to inform, kind of what our flagship product really ends up being.
Yeah. And that's another really cool perspective too, is, right now, like I've always been really excited about the disruptive use cases for dApps mostly. Like I've really not cared too much about TradFi. I know it's a huge deal. I know that most of the world runs on it. I've got a small bank account with a few bucks in there, but like I've been virtually unbanked for over a decade. And but so when everyone thinks about like upgrading the kind of traditional world and for blockchain for use cases and stuff like that, right now in every headline it's about real world assets, so mostly like commodities, bonds, stocks, money markets, whatever, and then the TradFi payment rails, so Swift or other settlement layers, stable coins. But this is another cool example of disrupting like a very antiquated kind of system that affects all of us, in one way or another, just from a different perspective. So anyway, Parth, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Where can people learn more about OpenVPP or you, or where can they follow you guys?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle. Everyone can learn about OpenVPP on our website, openvpp.energy.
Cool. Thanks, Parth.
Thanks, Kyle. Take care.